Hi everyone, my name's Rosemary Wette and I work in Applied Language Studies in the School of Languages, Cultures and Linguistics, and I was the Clear Fellow for Arts in 2017. My topic of my talk today is Common Core and Discipline-Specific Elements of Proficient Student Writing and Arts. I'll definitely acknowledge the importance of Common Core elements, but the main emphasis in my talk will be how Common Core and discipline-specific elements are realised and integrated in one arts subject area. The aim of my project was to explore Common Core and discipline-specific elements in undergraduate writing and arts subjects by learning about the assignment requirements and staff views on proficient writing in phase 1 of my study, and then developing workshops on dissertation writing with BA Honours students in history. Research evidence using large corpora and analysing large numbers of texts from across disciplines has really provided us with some very strong evidence, work by Ken Hyland and others, very strong evidence of disciplinary differences in academic discourse. These cover areas such as how new knowledge is constructed, how source texts are used, the degree of emphasis on research practices and methods, the rhetorical structure of texts, their sections, moves and steps, the need to convince and persuade the reader, the degree of qualification of claims, the degree of conciseness and impersonality in the text, choices with regard to lexis, syntax, prefabricated language patterns, the degree of visibility of the writer, and ways of engaging with readers. This isn't to say that there aren't common core elements also. They exist in language, a preference for nominalization, lexical and syntactic density, Greco-Roman vocab, prefixes and affixes, a more formal register and impersonal tone. And with regard to discourse features, lexical, grammatical accuracy, coherence, conciseness, clarity, cohesion, syntheses and critical evaluation of source texts, convincing and balanced arguments, engagement with the reader, and the need for an authoritative, authorial voice. However, I think the common core elements relate more to form rather than use, and there are disciplinary differences in the frequency of the forms, how visible they are in the texts, and how they are realised. The first phase of my project involved interviewing staff in arts about what they thought proficient undergraduate student writing was. And there seemed to be general agreement across the people that I interviewed that good assignments showed these features. They showed an understanding of course themes, appropriate use of scholarly sources, engagement with an assignment topic through critical analysis and argument, use of evidence and examples in support of appropriate claims, coherent organisation, transitions, the use of signposting, well-structured sentences and paragraphs, grammatical and lexical accuracy. However, there were, of course, disciplinary differences. The history staff or history lecturers pointed out the need for argument within a historical narrative and for writing historically. My applied linguistics colleagues pointed out the importance that students are able to apply theory to practice. I also asked teachers about what kind of support they routinely provide students with, and they talked about things like detailed assignment task sheets and marking rubrics, in-class explanations and discussion of proficient models, scaffolded tasks, opportunities for peer review, feedback on drafts, and marked assignments. I then decided to come out of my disciplinary silo of applied linguistics and to try to develop and implement some workshops in another disciplinary area, which was history. I was invited to work with History 780, which is a series of workshops for their BA Honours dissertation students. So I attended all their workshops. I analysed 10 proficient dissertations, which I got student permission to work with for the workshops. I discussed students' writing needs with the convener. I dipped my toes and tried to learn about the discourse of history, its individualistic, loosely structured, person-oriented nature, its concern with details of events, qualities, complications, and interpretations. It was a lot more different than my own discipline than I had first realised. And I drew on this information, my own experience as a teacher of academic writing at graduate level and as a researcher. The plan for my workshops, I had 4 hours, and I used a kind of a outside-in model of, first of all, starting with the research article and overview and its core components, which in history is introduction, historiography, methodology, argument, conclusion. And then looking at three very salient features for history, which is time, causality, and argument, and finishing with meta-discourse, the language features, managing the information flow and engaging with readers. So I started with the dissertation overview. Students really needed to know what a dissertation looked like, what the body of the text looked like, how long it would be, how long each section was, how many references, how many footnotes. So I analysed the dissertations from a kind of an overview perspective. We looked at the standard components, which were kind of more or less compulsory or obligatory, and the tremendous variability which characterises the discipline of history, and also the dissertations. We looked at what components were optional, the contents, acknowledgements, quotes, etc. Then we looked at parts of the core components of the dissertation, the introduction and how that works. Introductions in history are very long. In some disciplines they're quite kind of short and spare. In history they're long. They have a hook, contextual information, definitions, historiography, rationale, preview. And then we also looked at the conclusion, of course, at the other end. We looked at how many primary, secondary sources students were likely to need, footnotes, and direct quotes, another really important part of a history dissertation. And the use of pictures, use of quotes, and how you can kind of attract the reader into the dissertation. I then looked at moves and steps in one component, the main component of the introduction, following work by John Swales, who talks about the CARS model, create a research space, the narrowing that you have in the introduction, which mirrors the sort of going out at the end. In history, this is a very long and important section of the dissertation, so we looked at the opening sentence and background information, what happens in the historiography in terms of the disciplinary discussion that's presented, the problems or issues, the writer's position. John Swales talks about the gap, in other words, the need for the research. What is it about current knowledge which identifies a need for the current research? The contributional value of the study, and at its narrowest point, introducing the study proper, its aims, its methodology, its rationale, its approach, its choice of sources. In the second session, I looked at features which are very important in history, which are time, causality, but also argument, which is important in all disciplines. And I thought I'd just show you an example from actually a published text, although I used a lot of examples from students' texts as well. Time is very important in a history dissertation, recording, explaining, analysing, establishing an interpretation. So this little text takes the position of 1740 as a pivot, in order to separate time before 740 and time after 740 to dramatise a change. So if you look at the green text, the War of Austrian Succession was a unique experience. It was the first time. Okay, we're talking about American War of Independence leading up to. So the green text shows you it's important. The red text shows you what happened before 1740. Before this war, American soldiers had almost exclusively been employed by American provisional governments. So we have past perfect to refer to what happened before the 1740 pivot time. Everything in blue is then projected into the future using wood for future, factual future, but also to kind of present this as a watershed moment. This dramatises the change of what happens after 1740. American troops would be dispatched. They would serve outside the mainland for the first time. The American people would respond in a different way because, of course, we're leading up to the War of Independence 30 years later. So the historian has not just given a chronology, he's chosen a point in time, looked backwards and looked forwards to show that this was a watershed moment. We also looked at causality because that's also very complex in history. We have cause and effect chains, long and short-term causes, stages in a causal process, all different ways of expressing causality. Argument is, of course, important in all disciplines. In fact, I think argument is sort of fundamental to academic writing. It's fundamentally a persuasive kind of enterprise. The writer argues for and against a particular interpretation, considers alternative interpretations, concedes that its interpretations are tentative and not factual in a discipline like history, uses qualified language to show certainty and doubt, provides evidence for claims, engages with the reader. The example I'm going to show you is a text which argues for the value of a contemporary account of a historical meeting in the 13th century. So we have here a writer arguing in favour of a contemporary account of a meeting that has been kind of rubbished by scholars. So he starts off by saying this passage has frequently been dismissed as unrealistic, fanciful, of little value. So he's saying to them, this is the argument against. Then he goes on, after all, as we will see, conceding merit to this argument that it is unrealistic, fanciful, of little value. Notice the word we, positioning the writer and the reader alongside each other. Then we go to the blue, and we have the contrast marker. However, if we view it in relation to this and this, as well as to this, a different interpretation becomes possible, and he's introducing his own position against the one of other scholars, and he's trying to persuade the reader to go along with what his position is. This account allows us, and now he starts to list the benefits. It allows us to glimpse this, but also this, and how this. So we have a writer sort of thinking aloud, showing us as one argument, and then showing us how the benefits of his own interpretation. I finished my workshops by looking at meta-discourse at the language level, which is discourse which allows the writer to engage with the reader. As I said, it's a fundamentally persuasive kind of writing. So the writer uses hedging and softening, boosting and strengthening, attitude markers, engagement markers, in order to bring the reader online and to persuade the reader to follow the writer's line of argument. Choice of reporting verbs are important, particularly in history, self-mention, direct engagement with the reader, all persuasive and all useful for writers in history. And the other one, transition signals, frame signals. This types of meta-discourse is really to manage the information flow, but again, the purpose of it is to make sure the reader follows the writer's line of thought. Okay, I'm just going to finish with a few of the challenges, vexing issues that people in my disciplinary area have been writing and puzzling about for quite some time. The fact that disciplinary discourses are neither self-evident nor transparent to us as academic literacy developers, nor to the subject lecturers who know them implicitly but may not know them explicitly, nor to students. What kind of instruction is most beneficial for students, and whose responsibility is it? Should it be embedded by the subject lecturers? Should it be adjunct, cooperative or collaborative by academic literacy developers or writing centre teachers, online or face-to-face? Should it be done independently by students as ethnographers of their own discipline, using guided web tools? And what should be emphasised? Language skills? Disciplinary socialisation, them learning the cultures of their disciplines, or should issues of power, identity, equity and a more critical stance also be included? Thank you very much.